Hello and welcome everybody. I believe, yep, we've already got a bunch of participants in here. So welcome to this year's third and final Ally webinar. I am very excited for today's talk because it is all about how to empower the next generation of the workforce, building that pipeline and keeping these kids involved and excited about the automotive and motorsports industries through STEM and STEAM programs. My name is Rachel Spear. I am the president of RS Marketing, a marketing and branding firm, consulting firm with focus on the automotive and motorsports industries. But enough about me. It's about our wonderful panelists that we have here today. So Dean, why don't you please kick off and introduce yourself?
My name's Dean Case. I guess I'm here representing, I'm a longtime volunteer with Society of Automotive Engineers, aka SAE. I've worked at Mazda, Ford, and Nissan on both the technical and business sides, including Ford Racing, Mazda Speed, and Nismo. And I do a lot of work with the collegiate design competition, Formula SA and Baja SAE.
You also do a lot of work with ETTN, from my understanding.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. Some great collaboration between ETTN, SEMA, and SAE. So we'll talk about that later.
Awesome. Thank you. Kira, kick us off next.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Kira Dasko, and I work for Universal Technical Institute. We're a technical training institution that has locations across the United States and train in the transportation and energy and skilled trades industries. This is my 16th year in technical education. I'm passionate about it. I'm a product of technical education myself and graduated from tech school many years ago. I'm not going to age myself, but many years ago, and have just been passionate about getting involved and empowering our youth. I think through all the different various things that we're involved in, we can do our part to pay it forward, and that's really what my passion is and the reason that I'm here today. I'm also an SBN member. And I'm also a We Roam Moto expedition member for motorcycle expeditions.
Wonderful. Tamara, please.
Hi, I'm Tamara Robertson. Most people know me from their living rooms with Mythbusters, but well before that, I became a licensed and patented engineer. I currently am on the board of directors for the Jesse Combs Foundation, where we empower, inspire, and educate young women in the trades in Jesse's honor. I'm also an ambassador for Society of Women Engineers. I lead a build every year with 600 little girls, getting hands-on with technical skills. And then I am on the board of directors for Discover E. So we also do scholarships for kids in the engineering field. So getting tools in kids' hands as young as possible is a full passion of mine. I want them to be able to forge the future that they see. And I've taught welding all over the globe to kids as young as 3 and women as old as 96. So you all can do it, even if you're afraid. We promise you can.
It's never too late to start, right?
Yeah.
So Jericho, why don't we go ahead and put up the first slide? There we go. So it should just be more of an introduction of just who we are. So while this is up, I would like to ask also Jericho for you to put up the polls. So it's really important for us to understand who's on the call today, so we can make sure that we are addressing your specific needs. So if you could please take a few minutes, fill this out. We'll make that helps us kind of understand who we're talking to. But also I want to emphasize, if we're going too fast or you have further questions, please either put something in the chat where I can then relay it to the panelists, or put it in the Q&A. Happy to go through and make sure that your questions are answered, because this is such an important topic. Also, if you would like to share your LinkedIn profile, this is a great way to network and get to know more people that are on this call, so we can all make sure that together we are empowering, being allies for that next generation, and making sure that we're being the role models for what that next generation should be. So I'll give it a few more seconds. And we really appreciate, again, you filling this out. It gives us a lot of valuable information. Awesome. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Wonderful. So why don't we go to the next slide? So this is just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So first and foremost, we all know that there are barriers to the next generation being a part of the automotive and motorsports industry. So we're going to talk about those barriers and how to address them. We're also going to be discussing educational opportunities, what's currently out there for these young students to get involved with. And then third, and probably most important, is how we as individuals and our companies can get involved in those educational opportunities to make sure that we are filling that pipeline with really talented youth. So, why don't we get started then? So next slide, please.
Okay, so we're gonna
say, Tamara, please kick us off because I know you have so much to say.
so obviously today we'll be talking a lot about empowering the future workforce. But when we talk about that, it's not just about helping kids. It's also about protecting the future of all of your businesses and about what the future of innovation is going to look like in America. Who gets to build it, who gets to shape it, and who gets left out if we don't reach back and start looking at these other avenues for kids. So the reality of the situation, based on the Bureau of Labor stats, the US economy is projected to add about 5 million jobs by 2034, which is great, except for the challenge that we're facing is that with that growth comes a need for replacement. Retirements alone will leave gaps that could swallow entire industries in STEM and tech if we don't act. Construction, for example, employs more than 8 million people today, but it needs annually 600,000 new workers just to fill the gap and keep projects on track. Manufacturing is going to see 2 million jobs go unfilled this decade alone if we don't start to figure out how to inspire that next generation to come into STEM and the trades. So while all of this sounds daunting, especially with the fact that that doesn't even include the numbers for what AI new jobs will be created, there are a lot of things that we all can do. And there's a lot of hope for us if we come together as allies. And so that's kind of what we'll talk about today. Kira, do you have some things to add?
You know, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head with coming together as a community. You know, it's our responsibility to support our own business and to build our own business. You know, it's not the mailmans, it's not the postal workers, it's not the principals, it's not, you know, any other person that's outside of our business. It's our responsibility to come together as an industry and as a network, and to be able to support our youth and to be able to support those gaps. And you have, you know, passionate people all across the industry doing great things. So sometimes it's just meeting the right people or coming to events like this today. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to brainstorm and collaborate, and we just got to get started.
I know, and it also comes back to as well, you know, making with how quickly all of our technology is changing and things like that, you know, staying competitive, making sure that we are able to understand what's coming up and using that next generation to help fulfill those needs. Dean, I know you do so much with SAE. I mean, what are your thoughts on why this is so important?
Well, the key thing, I always, when I'm recruiting volunteers for an event, I say, don't do it as a favor to me. Do it for your own selfish best interest of meeting great people you might want to hire or your future customers. Because you're right. I mean, motorsports is a niche sport, and we need to grow that niche, and we can't assume that people are automatically going to follow in our footsteps on it. You need to help make them feel welcome, bring them in, and not everyone's going to follow the same path. You know, but when I talk to companies, we know how to hire engineers. Finding the skilled tradespeople is far more challenging right now.
Yeah.
And then maintaining them once you get them too. So we all talked prior to this about the importance of not just the recruitment and the landing of the talent, but then the building of community that enables them to stay in the pipeline. So when they have hard days, do they have peer mentors or stepwise mentors to reach out to figure out how to navigate those rough patches instead of just fully exiting the workforce stream. And then when they're coming back from life events, be it, you know, family building or caretaking for older family members, are they able to come back to your business? Do you believe in things like returnships, where you can bring back accelerated talent that has the education but might have had a little bit of a gap that they've had to weather? Those kind of community aspects that look at it not just as what is the skill, but what does the person with the skill need to be able to thrive and survive in these trades and these pathways, need to be able to make your business as successful as their careers.
Yeah.
You know,
And I will, oh, please go, Kira. Yes.
I was gonna say that just to that point, there's quite a few things that you can do as an individual, and we oftentimes look to the leaders in the industry or the builders or the foundations to open up their doors and to provide the space and support that our youth needs. But to be honest, there's small things that you can do. And I know we're going to discuss some of the things that we can do individually. And that's really the point of this is to give you, our audience, the empowerment to realize that you bring a lot to the table and your skill sets, your knowledge, your time in the industry is just as valuable and could make the difference in inspiring or helping a youth, find their pathway. And so we encourage all of you guys to step up and to own it, at the same level that we would expect to see some of the leaders in the industry, because it realistically is all of our responsibility.
Yeah. And Tamara, you said it earlier too, with so much more manufacturing coming back onto US soil too. I mean, we've got to create those talented next generation that can help us make sure that this awesome automotive industry is maintained. So anyways, so yes, it is very important. And I think we've all talked a lot about why it's so important, but let's get into the barriers and how we can address them. So Jericho, next slide, please. So Kira, why don't you kick us off with some of what you've seen as some of the barriers and how you have addressed them?
I think everything that you have listed on here really is on point. We know that not everybody has the same level of opportunities or resources available to them to be able to get involved in our business and, and to the basic level, and when I grew up, I had a garage and people who were interested in cars and motorcycles and tools. And, it was kind of second nature to learn righty-tighty and lefty-loosey, but not everybody has that, so I think, understanding that there are gaps in just the resources and the facilities and or knowledge that these youth have available to them is a barrier and is a challenge. And then, of course, based off location, or stereotyping, I had a lot of criticism even from my own family when I got involved in the trades and wanted to go to school as a motorcycle technician. And I realized that, coming into a place like a technical school, it gave me the courage to be able to move forward and the confidence to be able to practice my trade in a space that was supported by the manufacturers. And I was, it's okay to learn information on your own, but you really need to practice your trade in this business. It's about matching and pairing that knowledge and that practice together, and having a space to do that is really crucial for our youth to be able to figure out if it's even good for them, if it's something that they like, or if it's something that they want to do as a hobby or a career, but at the end of the day, providing that space or getting involved with our youth to be able to give them the knowledge and the support to do it and encouragement to do it is a major boundary. They don't all have that available to them. So I think making that available, there's multiple different ways that we have really good people in education in the high schools that are doing that right now, but finding other ways to involve the industry and supporting those good teachers is really what we need to do and get it more accepted at the home level. We need the parents and for the families to encourage kids to look at this as a valuable and viable career pathway, because it truly is. There's a lot of opportunities, so we just need to open up those doors and communicate the positive outcomes that are available in these types of industries.
At UTI, has there been specific things that you guys have provided to some of these students to help, address some of those barriers?
Absolutely. So we have a Women in STEM program that we run across the country at our campuses, and we encourage women to come to campus and hear from panelists just like us, right, that are speaking about their time and experience in the industry and building that network of encouragement and mentorship to be able to provide those women the support that they need to choose this pathway and to find different opportunities that could be a good fit for them and explore it, you know? So we do that. And then we also offer free classes to juniors in high school. So they can come up and they can take a free engine course at all of our campuses across the United States. Some offer more than just an engine course, but you know, as a junior in high school, you're really trying to figure out what that next step is after you graduate. And if you ask a student who has never been a technician in their life if they want to be a technician, how are they going to know? You know, like I said, you got to practice this business and work with your hands and, you know, make it tangible and accessible to them. And so opening our doors to give them that space and that encouragement. And then obviously the guidance from our technical staff is something that's really important to do. And, you know, and I think highly of our company for doing that for those students.
That's amazing. Dean, what's been your experience in the barriers that you've seen with some of the students that you've worked with, and how have you helped them address it?
Well, a lot of it is geographical. When I deal with the college students is huge because, you know, if you're in Southern California, you're Detroit, Indianapolis, you know, some of these hubs, there's amazing resources within a short drive. You know, I visited a school in North Dakota where it's kind of like they are way in the boondocks, and finding resources for schools like that is much more challenging. So there is a lot to be said for that, you know, and here again, SEMA has got companies all over the country, but there are major hubs. And I think that for some of those smaller companies who are, you know, they chose a great place to live, but it's off the beaten path, if you will, and helping those schools is probably even more critical. You know, if you're in Detroit, it's not hard to find an automotive engineer or technician to talk to. But one thing I would mention, you know, when you're talking about getting kids hands-on, I deal with a lot of students who their dream job is 100% remote. It's kind of like, okay, be careful what you ask for. If your job can be 100% remote, they can find someone offshore who will do it for a fraction of your cost. If you're physically working on something, if you have to go in to touch the parts of the car or the mechanism, that can't be offshored. So there's a lot more long-term stability, I think, in these careers. And we need to emphasize that this whole working 100% remote is not all it's cracked up to be.
That's a great point. The longevity of actually being the one to be touching it and be a part of it. You become an integral part. I love that point. And Kira, per what you were saying, you know, exposure is the first step to curiosity. So Tamara, please give us your experience on the barriers and how you've helped people address them.
Yeah, I would, you know, second, third, quadruple the exposure part of it, right? Because the number one thing I always hear from young people is, I didn't even know that this is something that could be for me. I mean, I literally remember sitting as a sophomore in college with a pre-engineering teacher being like, why are you not in engineering? And me looking at her and saying, I don't think girls get to do that. And that truth is something that if kids don't see it, they can't be it. And the cool part is that kids want to try on new identities. You know, research shows that from ages 10 to 14, they are all about deciding who they are and trying any and every identity that they see. But if they're not being exposed to it, if they're not living in somewhere, you know, an area like Chicago or Detroit, if they're in a rural farm town like I was, they just don't know that that's an identity that they can even access, let alone that it exists. And so middle school is really where they're starting to form that full identity for themselves. And by high school, they've already figured out like this pathway is not for me, or they've started imparting their own barriers to entry, whether it's, you know, economic, or it's just that they don't see themselves there. And so the fact that most of our workforce doesn't start recruitment until they're about to graduate high school puts us so far behind that curve. And that's why things like outreach with STEM groups and trades workshops and all of these hands-on camps can be so beneficial for kids. And we as businesses can really start to reach out to them and be that name that they see in middle school, that they're like, oh, I want to be someone that works for that company in the future, and help to train them. And so I think that's one of the biggest barriers that I've seen, is that kids just simply don't have access to those tools. You know, if they live in a big city, they may not have access to a garage to tinker in, or they may just simply not be able to afford to like even make it to libraries now have maker spaces, but they may not be able to get there. Transportation is a big barrier, cost, tools are a big barrier, costs, and then mentors like the incredible people that are here on this, you know, call are something that they also need, just so that they see that it's an option.
Yeah. I think that's why it made Mythbusters such a great show. You know, because it showed that anyone could do it. It really broke down a lot of those stereotypical barriers. But you did bring up something that I just think you nailed it. It's something that you're not only exposing them to these different opportunities, but you're also exposing them to you and your company. So you're fulfilling what's going to happen in the future. I love that point. So we now have another quick poll for everyone who is on the call. What do you think is the biggest barrier for the future workforce? So we have some of the ones that we have mentioned on the slide here, but please, if you do put other, I ask you to actually include what you think that other barrier would be in the chat. So we can actually, that might be something that we can address and even think of, because if we're not talking about it, you know, we got to make sure that we are recognizing everything out there so we can do this as efficiently and effectively as possible. So.
Actually, while you're waiting for that, I had a chance to go to the Toyota open house at their hydrogen research center. And it was a spectacular community event, and they had a whole bunch of things set up for little kids. And they're direct across the street from their fuel cell operation is an elementary school. And for decades, they've partnered with that school. So any kid who went to, I think it was 186th Street Elementary School in LA Unified, they're across the street from this great resource. And Toyota has this amazing community engagement with them to where, you know, not everyone has the resources to do that, but it was really impressive to see.
That's amazing. I mean, just to get that future talent integrated right away. I mean, hydrogen fuel development is something that I love, and I try to keep up on that research, but that's really cool to hear that they're right across the street from an elementary school. That's cool. All right, so the poll's done. All right, so it looks like one person might have put, so one person put other. So if you could put that in the chat if you're willing. But all right, so thank you very much. I find that very interesting, and we will take that to our next ally committee calls, and we'll be addressing some of those things too. So thank you for your input. So Jericho, why don't we go to the next slide? All right, perfect. So Dean, why don't you kick us off with some of the things that you do and how it's improved and helped so many students, both, you know, of all ages, in their career paths?
Well, my niche is Formula SA and Baja SA, which is the collegiate design series. And if you've never seen one, you need to go find your local school. And I can guarantee you there's probably a school near you. Here in Southern California, we have 17 schools just in Southern California building these cars. With over 250 nationwide. These have become the premier recruiting grounds because companies don't have the bandwidth to go visit 100 schools, so they go where these competitions are. And every one of these schools could benefit from local support. And it doesn't have to be monetary. A lot of it is just helping them, giving them feedback, helping them out in that level. So that is, you know, been the primary mechanism for engineers who want to get into the industry. And the SMART teams recruit non-engineers as well, because there's a business presentation they have to do, cost analysis, and, you know, don't let the engineer do the graphic design work, you know, don't let the business major design the suspension, you know, stay in your lane a little bit, but also cross-trained where everyone becomes smarter in the process. Because, you know, you're not going to work with just your own little niche once you get out in the industry. You need to communicate with others. So that's been where I've spent a lot of my time. And SAE's real niche is in the collegiate thing. They do have AWIM, which is a World in Motion for K through 12. I've had a little bit of involvement with that, but I stumbled upon some of these other ones like this H2GP, which is fuel cell vehicles, little scale models, getting kids to do that. It's kind of an alternative to like the robotics competitions, which are amazing, but a lot of those schools are kind of getting a little bit burnt out on that, and they're looking for alternatives. And due to a variety of things, including TV exposure to Formula One, there is greater interest in motorsports these days. And then one last one I'll give a little pitch for is Grassroots Motorsports $2,000 Challenge, which is not a collegiate or student competition. It's open to anybody. And the competition's in Florida every year. And it ranges from true professional teams who are just doing it for fun, but very serious, to 3 friends who bought a beater car and a case of beer and did a parking lot build. So very serious to not serious, but we've had some great successes with students who didn't have the resources to do a Formula or Baja car, achieving success. Last year or the year before, 4 high school girls won the overall competition, beating not just the high school kids, they beat the pro teams.
Wow.
And my only bewilderment on that is not one of the 4 was going to pursue engineering in college. One was going to be a doctor, one was a lawyer, and 2 hadn't figured out what they want to do, but obviously had serious skills.
And I think that, again, that kind of lends to what we were talking about maybe a bit earlier with, developing that community. So they do have that inherent want to be part of the community that has helped them get to that. But to just have the exposure for something like that is awesome. And I love the fact that the SAE, A World in Motion, is focusing on some of those younger students as well, because we all know you go to a racetrack, you sit in a race car, you're around just cars in general, you hear that motor fire up, you get that one smell of that amazing gasoline or whatever it is. Like, these kids get hooked, and it's something that becomes that core memory. But it has to happen, per what you guys were saying earlier, at an early age, Tamara, like what you were saying, like that identity, that exposure to what they can be. What are some of the things, Tamara, that you work with, and how have you seen it kind of develop students into that next generation workforce?
Yeah, so I've been an ambassador with Society of Women Engineers for the last 8 years. I run their Invent It, Build It program for their high school room, which is part of their Sweet Next program. And so for those that are not familiar, Sweet Next is their feeder program into the STEM side of things. Kids also can go into tech and trade. I talked to the high school room about apprenticeships just as much as I talk to them about being able to go into engineering, because I think both are really incredible pathways. And for a lot of these young girls, this is the first time they're ever hands-on with tools. And so any middle schooler or high schooler that shows interest in tech or STEM is able to enter into the SweeNext program. And through that, they get free video series, they get free camps, they get free mentorship. But the biggest part of it is the community. And so once a year at the global that they host, this year it'll be in New Orleans, they work with all of the local schools to bus in kids that are, they have teachers that say this kid would do amazing, but they just haven't had this chance. And they get to come and they join us for a day of hands-on building. And for a lot of them, it may not only be the first time they touch a tool or actually integrate with STEM, but it may be the first time that they're in a group that's with other girls. So for a lot of them, that's a big part of being able to see this as their identity, is instead of it just being a robotics club at school, which we've seen statistically ends up still predominantly being male, and then not sticking around because they feel like they're not represented in the room. They get to see an incredible ballroom full of young women like them that are just as excited. And we connected to everything from cars to makeup to fashion. Wherever their minds take them, we try to let them know that there is always room for technicians and engineers in all industries, so that they don't feel like, well, I'm not into, cars, or I'm not into makeup, so this isn't for me. They find that they can find their own pathway. I know Girl Scouts has their STEM badges, and the Scouts also have their STEM badges, which I've done some camps with them, and those are always really helpful as well. But the SWE chapters, I just know they follow them all the way through the pipeline. They have collegiate level, then they have young professional level, and then beyond. So that's one of the things I really like about them, is they don't just kind of put them in and say, go for it. They really give them support throughout.
Nice. And you said earlier in the intro that you did stuff with Discover E. So can you give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Discover E is really a neat initiative. So they do this future city competition every year. It's in the spring in Washington, D.C. They bring in everyone from local politicians to local tech leads to see what these kids are creating. And they're really tasking them with the onus of, like, how would you save the world? How would you do this better than what we're doing today? Or how would you take the tech that we have and make it go further, or even repurpose it? And so it's really an intriguing competition to see all of the different ways that they're able to do this. And they do scholarships and they have mentorship programs. And a lot of what they do is around exposure. So they come in and they talk with business owners like those in the room, and they have them share their journeys with the students. Because again, you may have experienced a failure that helps inspire a kid to do a complete different change. And those change maker talks really help to get them to see the dots or connect the dots for themselves and see people that look like them.
Yeah, from what you and Dean have also said, it's almost like some of these events, I hate to put it in a football analogy, but it's like these football games, these collegiate football games where all the pro scouts come. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us as businesses and, to identify and foster that talent. And I love the fact that, I mean, we talked about it a bit earlier, where it's the innovation, it's the use of technology, like allowing their brains to just go for it and like be there's no barrier to what they can do or create. I think that's really cool. I personally had no idea about that. I'm going to look more into that because I think that's really something awesome. But Kira, I know with the Institute, I mean, you guys do so much. So please share with us like all that you guys do to, give opportunities for these youth.
Well, at the end of the day, the youth programs that are out there, this is a short list. There's quite a few that are out there, but one thing that I find in common with all of them is they're all looking for locations to host these events. And so as business owners and people that are involved in this industry, keep in mind and do your outreach to some of these organizations. If you can be a host or you can support in some way, I encourage you to do that. We host Hot Rodders of Tomorrow events here at our facility. We also host Switch Labs, which is an electric vehicle components company. They actually make product for high schools, specifically for teachers and for schools to purchase. For curriculum and then product to be able to go along with that curriculum for students to learn about electric vehicles. And they just hosted a Switch rally at our campus where multiple schools came up and participated and all competed. And they had to go through some of the similar things of a budgeting and then presentation, as well as be able to build out, their vehicle and then test it. They actually had a test track, which was a little nerve-wracking to see students driving those around. But at the end of the day, that's what we do, right? We have to provide them with that space. So all of those types of organizations that are out there, they're looking for support and they're looking for venues or participants. We've been judges before for some of these events. And as a business owner, even if you don't have the space to host one, you can participate still and be a judge. And then there's community ones. We talk a lot about the organizations that are there doing something to be able to provide an opportunity to these students, but there's also high schools that are opening their doors and other avenues. And I'll give you guys an example. Washington High School in San Francisco is the only high school with a automotive shop in their high school. And you can literally see the Golden Gate Bridge, and they are in downtown San Francisco. They're the only one in that district that offers an automotive program. And Mr. Del Rosso is the instructor there. And he has a evening session where any other students from the high schools that don't have access to the auto shop during the day can get bussed in and they can participate in his class in the evening. and he opens his shop up in the evening to be able to support kids and give them a space to be able to, you know, learn about cars and fix projects or bring in their own vehicles and things like that. And so sometimes even at the community level, there's incredible people doing that and creating those spaces and sometimes partnering with them or providing support or doing a field trip, you know, to your facility and exposing them to different opportunities is something you can do as that business owner, you know, even if you can't get involved or host an event, you can still do it at that community level.
When you're talking about spaces, we've discovered, we've partnered with Lions Automobile Museum in Rancho Dominguez. I think some of you know Lana Chrisman, who's the executive director there. They wanted to do some K through 12 programs, and she's like, okay, do we have to develop materials? And we figured, no, SAE's got materials. We can get that for you for free. You know, section, I think we bought a bunch of materials to give them. And we're actually then tying in the collegiate chapters. SAE has a program called Learn Twice, where the students on a Formula Baja team can earn money from the SAE Foundation if they will go in and mentor the K through 12 kids. So we're trying to link it all together to where, you know, the kids don't want to listen to grandpa here tell them how to do it, but they'll listen to the rock star at Cal State Long Beach who's building a race car in college. That's really cool. And so a lot of it is finding these ways in. And one of the challenges when you're talking through K through 12 is a lot of schools, it's hard to get in, that they don't, you know, so if you can go in through, you know, I'd rather go and support SWE Next, who already is trusted within that school, as opposed to walking in and saying, here's who we are. And so some of this, if you can find someone who's already got that credibility, and, you know, SAE SoCal has partnered with SWE LA a couple of times. We're looking to do more. It's like, we'd like to track those SWE Next chapters near the Lions Museum to come over there, because here's this great neutral resource, you know, that no one feels that, oh, well, I don't want to support it because that shop is my competitor. It's like, no, let's find some common places. And all these nonprofit museums want to get more kids in there, and they want to achieve educational goals. So there's a lot of other places you can go, even if your shop or business isn't in the right neighborhood or isn't large enough or whatever, you can still find a way.
I think that's a wonderful point, Dean. And, you know, I'll just say right now on behalf of Universal Technical Institute and our resources and representatives, we have a lot of connections with high schools. You know, a lot of our business is done with the high schools on a day-to-day basis. And so, you know, if you're somebody who's looking for that connection, to Dean's point, that's a trusted source, you can absolutely reach out to us and we'd be happy to partner with you. Or if you'd like to come up, you know, and participate in some of the events that we host here for some of these groups. You know, we're always looking for extra judges and things like that. And so you can absolutely reach out to us and we'd be happy to work with any industry that wants to get involved in supporting these organizations.
I think you guys are so on top of it. I mean, we are together, we are the tide that lifts all ships. So with that, this is a perfect lead in to the next slide. But before we get there, we've got one more poll for everybody to answer. It is, have you ever been involved in a STEM or STEAM program as a participant, volunteer, judge, sponsor? I saw Sarah had posted on there that she was a judge, which is awesome. Thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing your experience there and what you were able to see and witness. But yeah, would love to know if most people have or have not been at least involved in one of these or others that we haven't mentioned on this list. Oh, Sarah, thank you also for sharing that that you have an automotive program called AXC at the Fairplex in Pomona, looking to host more students. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. Awesome. Give it a few more seconds. And you can find myself and the panelists, we're on LinkedIn. So you can find us if you have ideas, thoughts, concepts, want to partner, want to sponsor, want to volunteer, reach out to us, please. We have, I mean, it's about all of our networks coming together, because that's what will make the next generation awesome. So interesting. So a little over half of the audience have not participated. So I hope you've learned a lot about some of the opportunities that are out there. Let's go to this slide. So we touched upon it a little bit already, but it's not enough just having the programs out there. It's about us getting involved. There's many ways. I'm going to actually kick it back to Dean again. Dean, what are ways that you found have been the most effective ways in which both individuals and companies can get involved with the different programs?
Well, I think obviously volunteering is key. I mean, when I talk to students, I explain to them here again, looking for who can do what on your program. Engineers generally have no discretion over money. When I was at Mazda, I couldn't have given you $50 of Mazda money. I could give you a car that was going to go to the crusher. And so we donated cars to auto shops and things, but I couldn't have given you any cash. You know, marketing departments and looking at foundations for money, but most groups, and I see this in a lot of other non-technical groups as well, groups need more volunteers than they need money. The bigger shortage is people who are willing to invest time. And, you know, finding companies, and here again, this gets into a lot of corporate cultures. And, you know, I'm not going to badmouth any companies. That's why I like to talk about companies I like and admire. You know, anytime I've had an idea and I pitched it to like Toyota, it's like, yeah, we're on board. What do you need? And, you know, they supply. And when I was hired to run the first Formula SAE West back in 2006, and the two companies that came through with volunteers were Toyota and Garrett Turbos. You know, I would have been really struggling without those two companies because I didn't just need warm bodies, I needed the right people. And so, you know, everybody can be a volunteer if they've got, we'll just carve out a little bit of time. That usually, you know, they're reluctant at first if you haven't done it, but once you do it, it's fun. I mean, you get inspired that there are kids who want to follow in your footsteps, regardless of what those footsteps are. And it's really nice.
Yeah. Kira, what about you? You said that there's many ways, so you already mentioned a few, so please continue on with what you were talking about.
You know, I think exposure, like we've been talking about, is key, and any way that you can, you know, partner to open up your facilities and allow kids to do field trips and things like that. I know that a lot of schools are required to introduce STEM career pathways or trades pathways, but they don't always have the connection or the resources to do that at a local level. And I think at a local level, you know, to Dean's point, the volunteering, if you have the ability to do that, is really important. And it could be, you know, at any of those different levels, whether it's a time frame or, you know, a short, you know, 1 hour, or just bringing in some products, getting some outside expertise into the classrooms is really important. And I think that, you know, engaging with your local community high schools is a good starting point, but any of these other, you know, different companies or organizations are always looking for people to get involved as well. You know, I mean, obviously SBN has different things that we can do, you know, and some of them are remote, you know, so even working with some of these different organizations, you might be able to help or volunteer and support their efforts from a remote standpoint, where you don't physically need to be in their backyard. So I think just opening the doors, getting involved is the first step, you know, and building that network and then seeing where it goes from there, you know.
Have you found that there have been certain methods that work better than others just to make people aware of some of these programs and the opportunities?
You know, I think that if you latch on to other people that are in the network, if you go to shows where, you know, like SEMA show, or you go to PRI, you know, you get involved in the motorsports business or the automotive business, you're going to find other people that already know some of these things, or other, you know, connections that you can go through. But a lot of the times, you know, until you really make that investment to see what they're doing out there, to ask the right questions and get involved. So for example, you know, being a part of the SBN Bronco build a few years ago, you know, I wasn't a SEMA member. I just found it online and I applied. And then from there, it transitioned into becoming a member, you know. So just seeing and starting with a simple Google search is still going to open up doors for you. So it's a good place to start, is just get involved, you know.
Tamara, please in your experience, how have you found people can be best involved? I know you mentioned workshops and stuff like that earlier, so please share what you think.
Yeah, I actually want to kind of speak specifically to like all of you as business owners and people that are high up in your companies, like some of the things that you guys can do to support the other people in your company as well, because you're obviously all very busy, but there's an impact that your company can have with a trickle down effect of doing things like reminding about company matching if you haven't. So let those that are already donating, let their dollar go further by it being doubled. Making it so that it's not a vacation day if they want to have outreach. So many of the best companies I've worked for have understood that the amount of time that I spend in the community is just as vital for them as it is for me and for the students that I interact with. And so they've made it a principle within their companies to have a certain number of days that you can just do outreach within the community for STEM and the trades, to be able to, again, build that pipeline that's going to bring workers in. Donating equipment, tools, software, things like that. You know, these are the things that you guys may already have on hand. You may just be getting rid of instead of just, you know, getting rid of it. Think about like, could I donate this older machine to a local tech school? Could I find a school that's bringing back shop, which thankfully so many more in the nation are? Could I give these to, you know, a library that has a maker space? You know, all of these can be beneficial. So my entire livelihood is built off of teaching workshops and going for companies like the USA Science and Engineering Festival and Swede Next and Girl Scouts, organizations that they have the locations and they have the audience, but they don't have the MC, they don't have the programming, they don't have the skill base to be able to teach the workshops. So I've been very lucky that I have STEM partners that cover the materials for me. They cover my travel, they cover the day cost to be there so that Girl Scouts doesn't have to pay. USA Science and Engineering doesn't have to pay. You know, I can give a keynote to engineering innovators and they don't have to pay because someone else knows that I'm going to thank their brand and get them in front of that audience. Or like when I do a Real Deal Revolution workshop, I bring Total Boat Resin because they support me in anything that I do to connect STEM and the trades. And so they're like, here's hundreds of dollars worth of resin every month to go out to whatever community Real Deal's already going to be in teaching in. And then Real Deal's not incurring that cost. I'm not incurring that cost, but we're inspiring as many people as possible within a weekend basis at a huge event for Harley or for Sturgis to be able to like get them excited. So these are things that you as businesses can do at a lower cost to entry because the cost of manufacturing is pennies compared to the dollars that I as a consumer would buy it for to then teach 100 kids with, right? So there's a lot of ways to not have to give your own time, but to create this environment and ethos within your business that enables your workers to give their time when they would like to and gives back in a way that really has impact, because kids leave these camps like with the swag that they're given and they walk into communities wearing a Caterpillar hat that has never even heard of Caterpillar, and now you've got middle schoolers raving and repping you everywhere you could think of, and they all want to be cool and be part of Caterpillar too, you know. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to grow your name on the backs of people that are already out there doing the work if you just enable them and empower them with the tools that they honestly need to be able to get to these kids and do it.
I'm lucky at Motivo. We do a lot of projects where we end up with supplies at the end of a project, and now they ask me, can any of the schools use this? And so, you know, we can give it away, keep it out of the landfill, and, you know, a lot of pluses. When I was at Ford, they had a policy, at least within one division, you could take a full work day to go volunteer at Formula SAE, but they expected you to also do one the weekend days as well. You can go on company time one day, but we expect you to invest 8 hours on your own time as well, which is very fair, you know.
Yeah. You know, and I just, as a side note, that's what this entire Ally program has really been about, is it's about establishing that culture, as you said it, Tamara, that ethos that really lifts everybody up, because we all want what's best for this industry. I mean, that's the whole point. So I think what you guys have said here is Absolutely fantastic. We do actually have a question though from Sarah. She says, how do you find out what the organizations are that need our help? Is there a certain place where we can raise our hand, or who is the person that would reach out to say how we can help? So so Tamara, why don't you kick us off there?
I was gonna say, so I have to like maybe when we're in the like last bit of Q&A, Google the actual name of it. But Discover E actually is harnessing machine learning right now to be able to scrape and build a database for people to come in and say, okay, this is the skill that I can offer volunteer wise. This is the budget I have, you know, who needs it, and be able to see in their area what they need. And it is something that really helps so that you can kind of know, like, is everyone helping the same community, or where's the community that we're missing? So I'll Google that to try to find it. But I was going to ask if Dean could tell about donorschoice.org.
Yeah.
Donors Choose is really cool. It's basically for teachers, which is kind of a sad state that teachers can't get the supplies they need to teach a class. But a lot of it is where they're inspired to do something different. It's like, I need 30 copies of this book, or we need these craft materials or whatever. And it's not, a lot of it's not STEM necessarily, but it's just helping. You can find maybe you want to go back. Hey, you grew up in a rural part. Now you're living in LA. You can look back and maybe find your old elementary school needs something, and you can just scroll through and find a teacher who needs something. And I think some of it's now set up to where it's like you just buy the stuff from Amazon. It's delivered to their thing. You don't have to physically do it, but some of them you can ship them materials you have. But it's just a great way to find something that touches your heart. That's like, yeah, that's a program I'd like to support. And I think it's pretty cool for the teachers. But it's frustrating that as a society we don't support teachers. A teacher having to find their own funding seems wrong to me.
No doubt.
Yeah, Kira, coming from the Institute's perspective, I mean, how can people reach out to UTI to help?
Well, I think that, through our resources here, calling a campus, or connecting with a representative in your area. I specifically work in admissions, but there's a lot of things on our campus here that our other departments are doing that you could potentially be a better fit to be able to work with some of those other departments, whether it's education or student services. Maybe you want to sponsor a student, and we have sponsorship programs that we have local companies participate in, and they sponsor students to go through some of our programs here that are from those socioeconomic, challenged areas. And they want to be able to see that student have the resources that they need to be able to better themselves and empower themselves and come out and work in the industry, and hopefully retain that student after they graduate. That's the other key part of it, is these companies are in desperate need to find qualified candidates and find those people who have practiced their trade, who have developed those skills, and are looking to make this a career choice. And so sponsoring those students turns into retaining those students and keeping them at their facilities. So it's been a really great program. But even from our employment services side, we also have a division that just helps companies establish tuition reimbursement incentive programs, where if they hire a student, they provide either tools or relocation benefits, or they provide some sort of a tuition reimbursement where they hire that person, pay them a salary, and then on top of it, they help to pay back some of their funding for school. And again, that's a retention program where that company is, investing back into that person who took the time to go to school and invest in themselves to bring that skill set at a higher level to their facility, and to be able to provide an actual skill set in completing the job and helping them make money. So it's hard to find these people that are excited, and then to get them to a point where they're workforce ready, and so sometimes those companies, they need somebody that's workforce ready. And so that's been a really powerful program to help employers pinpoint those workforce ready students that are graduating. And there's another company that is a scholarship, and they do a lot more than just scholarships, but they offer online training. They have a wide variety of different companies that partner with them. They're called Tech Force Foundation. And Tech Force is widely used across all of our campuses, and we talk about it in high schools with counselors and with students, and they're a great one-stop shop to be able to provide either a scholarship or get involved, see who is in that network. It's kind of like a LinkedIn database where once you're in the network and you join TechForce, you have access to other people who are in the network, different events that are happening. So you can see a lot of the events through the industry that TechForce is involved in or looking for volunteers for or whatnot through that space. And so TechForce is a great resource to be able to go to and see how you can get involved.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, all three of you. We are finishing up. We've got 5 minutes left. So Jericho, if you could go to the last slide. I would just like our panelists, let's start with you again, Kira. Give us your, like, a few key takeaways from today on the different things that we talked about, the barriers, the opportunities, and how to get involved. What would, if you had just 30 seconds, what would you say to our audience about how you could best help empower the future workforce?
Well, I would say don't let it stop here, right? Today was, you guys showed up, you're obviously interested in continuing to support this, or you're looking for ways to support our youth and this space. And so keep it going. You know, it's not my idea, it's not your idea, it's the idea. Let's have synergy, let's solve problems together, let's build that network. And, you know, and obviously reach out, you know, if you are in my backyard and you want to work with me in particular, I'm happy to help, or any of my resources through Universal Technical Institute or just the industry. You never know. You know, I'm just happy to open that door. So get involved and stay involved.
Tamara, why don't you go next?
I would just say, because obviously as business owners, you know, ROI, bottom lines, understand time is money, right? So empowering the future workforce isn't just, it's not charity. It's literally going to mean the survival of our industries, because we can't run without builders and welders and coders and technicians. So if we can really inspire these kids, you know, they need to see those pathways, they need those mentors, they need those real world opportunities and aha moments, and we can be the ones that give that to them. We can connect those two truths and fill that pipeline with really valuable resources for the future. So if we all work together, we build this community and support it, you know, we can really ignite that innovation and open those doors that helps us build a generation that's not afraid to fail, and it's willing to start to build one step at a time.
Dean?
Yeah, when I give my career talk to engineering students, you know, part of parting words are work hard, be nice, and volunteer. Here is kind of, I think the key thing for companies is collaborate. You don't have to create something from ground zero. Find the other groups around you who are already doing something. You know, like I said, don't try to knock on the door at the high school. Find out if they have a SWE next. Support that. You know, if there's a local SAE chapter there, support that. Find the groups that are already got it and just help amplify that, because that's a lot easier and you're going to get results much quicker. And then, you know, here again, those groups, you know, some of our most successful student event ever for SA SoCal was when we collaborated with SEMA ETTN. And, you know, this last March, we had 425 students from 30 universities. And more importantly, perhaps, we had over a dozen companies that are actively hiring. And so it really was beneficial for everybody. You know, I saved, those companies got the cream of the crop and didn't have to travel. You know, I put together, you would have had to spend over 1,000 miles to travel to visit all those schools. It would take you a month. We got it to you in one day. So collaborate is the key word here for me.
Yeah, and to Dean's point too, like, look at the people that are already in your company and maybe even ask if they're already volunteering somewhere. So at Discover E, we just recently found out that we have over 120 volunteers from a company that we can't get to even like return a phone call to talk to. So it's like their employees fully believe in the mission, but the company itself doesn't even have it on their radar. So your employees may already be volunteering at really amazing things happening in your direct nearby community, to Dean's point, that you could be able to not have to pay airfare to go and volunteer at, not be able to spend a lot of money and really get big bang for your buck when just by supporting them and making it so they're not taking vacation days when they do
I
it.
think I want
Yeah,
to talk to you
Sorry, I gotta jump in. We've got like probably 30 seconds left. Can we go to the last slide? I know we could talk about this forever. I can't thank you all three of you for such valuable information. Please, if you're not part of SBN, please go to SEMA.org/join-SBN. Be a part of it. Men and women are welcome. These are the upcoming events that SBN is hosting. Our reception on November 4th, Gear Up Girl, which is for women to get to know other women, on Wednesday, November 5th. As it was mentioned in the chat, the real deal is in our SBN booth. We're at the PRI show, and then we've got our Women's Leadership Forum coming up next year. So thank you all for participating. Thank you, our audience, for also participating. Thank you all. This has been a wonderful, wonderful webinar, and I appreciate everybody's time.